Welcome to my channel, where the shadows speak and the tales chill the bone. I'm your host, and each week, we dive into the depths of the most spine-tingling horror stories that will leave you questioning the silence of the night. Today, we embark on another terrifying journey with a story that's sure to haunt your dreams. Remember to hit that like button if the video sends a shiver down your spine, leave a comment below to share your thoughts or fears, and don't forget to subscribe to ensure you never miss out on the next dose of dread. Let's keep the thrill alive together. Now sit back, dim the lights, and prepare for a frightful experience. Under the guise of a perfect summer day, the group ventured into the heart of the Adirondack wilderness. Their destination was a secluded lake, untouched by civilization, promising tranquility. Yet, an undercurrent of unease stirred among them as they set out. Their hike was punctuated by the serene beauty of the forest, but the further they went, the more the air seemed to thrum with a hidden energy. The trees loomed tall, their leaves whispering secrets to those who would listen. As twilight painted the sky, they reached the lake. Its surface was a glassy stillness that reflected the encroaching darkness. They set up camp, the ritualistic act providing a false sense of security. Dinner was a quiet affair. Tom found a peculiar-looking rock with strange carvings near the shore. It felt cold to the touch and gave off a faint vibration that resonated with the forest's heartbeat. Nightfall brought with it a chorus of wildlife, but it was cut short. Silence reigned once more, a silence so thick it was almost tangible. The friends huddled by the fire, each sound magnified, every shadow suspect. Lucas ventured into the woods to fetch more firewood. He returned with tales of glowing eyes in the distance, but his friends dismissed it as the trick of shadows. Yet the firelight flickered, casting eerie shapes that danced ominously. Sarah's sleep was restless. She awoke to the sound of her name whispered on the wind. Outside her tent, no one was there. The feeling of being studied, like an insect under a magnifying glass, was overwhelming. Emily discovered an old, tattered guidebook near their packs. It contained cryptic notes in the margins, detailing experiences of previous campers who encountered a guide in these woods. The group decided to follow the guidebook's trails, hoping it would lead them back to safety. The forest seemed to close in around them, the paths narrowing as if the trees themselves were alive. They stumbled across an abandoned campsite, its air heavy with the scent of decay. A makeshift shrine stood at the center, adorned with personal items, wallets, jewelry, photos, that seemed too fresh to be left by time alone. A sudden breeze carried with it a voice clear as day, instructing them to seek the guide. No one was there, but the command echoed in their minds, compelling them forward. The guidebook led them to a cavern hidden behind a waterfall. Inside, the walls dripped with moisture, and an odd luminescence bathed the cave in a ghostly light. On the cavern walls, they saw drawings depicting campers in distress, and in the center, a pedestal held a mirror. In its reflection, the friends saw not themselves, but the shadowy figures that had haunted their periphery. A hidden compartment in the pedestal revealed a dusty, leather-bound journal. It chronicled the descent into madness of a group just like theirs, ensnared by the enigmatic guide. The journal spoke of a harmony with the dark, suggesting songs and silence as offerings. Skeptical but desperate, they agreed to try it, the weight of their situation pressing down. They sang softly, their voices blending with the gentle flow of the waterfall. As they fell silent, the cave seemed to inhale, the luminescence pulsing gently. A figure materialized from the glow, a spectral guide with eyes like the night sky. It pointed to the drawings, then to them, as if drawing a parallel. The friends, paralyzed by fear, watched as the guide traced a finger across the wall, illuminating a path that wasn't there before. It then vanished, leaving them breathless. Emerging from the cave, they found the forest transformed. The trees no longer seemed hostile, but the path was marked by the same luminescence from the cave. They followed the light, which led them through twists and turns, each step feeling like an eternity. The forest's sounds returned, but they were now a symphony directed by unseen hands. They came across an old ranger station, seemingly untouched by time. Inside, they found canned food, a radio, and a note. "The guide knows the way. Listen, and you shall be led." The radio crackled to life, playing static-filled music that oddly matched the song they had sung. It felt like a sign, a nod from the guide that they were on the right path. As they rested, shadows played tricks on their minds. Figures darted just out of sight, and whispers filled the gaps between the ranger station's old wooden boards. The journal reappeared, its new pages detailing a final test of wills. They had to leave something of personal value behind to ensure their escape, a token of their gratitude to the guide. Reluctantly, each friend left an item: a watch, a necklace, a photograph. The act felt like sealing a pact with the unknown. The next morning, the path of light was gone, but the forest seemed to guide them. They navigated with an unspoken understanding, as if the woods had become an old, familiar enemy. Hours turned into what felt like a day. Their exit was in sight, yet the forest stretched on, infinite and indifferent to their plight. Reaching the edge of the woods, they looked back at the expanse they had braved. The ranger station was no longer visible, as if it had been swallowed by the forest. Their car, untouched, awaited them. The journey home was silent, each lost in thought about the guide and its intentions. Days turned into weeks, but the friends couldn't shake the feeling of being marked. Their personal items left behind seemed like a small price to pay for their lives. Yet one by one, they began to receive their items in the mail, each package postmarked from a place none had ever heard of. Inside, with their belongings, was a note: "You have passed. Remember the guide." The finality of the note didn't bring relief, but a lingering dread. They had survived, but what had they become? The true horror of their camping trip was not the forest's malice, but the guide's enigmatic presence, a reminder that some parts of nature were meant to be revered, not understood. The group entered the woods of Whispering Pines, eager for adventure. The dense foliage whispered secrets as the sun cast its golden glow, yet an unsettling stillness hung in the air. As dusk settled, they found a campsite by a babbling brook. The water's melody was soothing, but the forest's silence after sunset felt oppressive. Night unfolded with strange occurrences. Footsteps circled their tents, and shadows seemed to flicker at the edge of the firelight. Each friend pretended to sleep, hearts racing. In the dead of night, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. It came from the direction of the woods, as if someone, or something, was in agony. Morning brought a grim discovery. The brook had run dry, and in its place was a trail of desiccated plants leading deeper into the forest. The air felt heavier on this path. They followed the trail reluctantly. It twisted and turned, seemingly leading them in circles, while the canopy above blocked out the sun, casting them in perpetual twilight. Suddenly, the trail vanished, leaving an open space with a circle of stones in the center. The stones were warm, pulsating with a strange energy that made their skin prickle. Each friend felt compelled to sit on a stone. As they did, visions of a desolate future where nature reclaimed the world flooded their minds, a silent prophecy from the vanishing trail. Desperately, they sought the path back to camp, but the forest had changed. Their GPS devices were dead, and the compasses spun wildly, unhelpful. That night, the campfire refused to light. Instead, a spectral flame appeared in the distance, drawing them towards a clearing where they found an ethereal figure. The figure, a spectral woodsman, beckoned them. He spoke of a harvest needing completion, his voice a haunting whisper that chilled their bones. They fled in terror, but the forest seemed to echo the woodsman's whispers. Branches clawed at their skin, and roots tripped them, as if the forest itself was preventing their escape. By dawn, they stumbled upon an ancient oak, its hollow trunk revealing a hidden cache of items. Journals, clothing, and trinkets, all belonging to previous campers. A journal inside recounted a similar tale, ending with the writer's plea: "We lit the spectral flame, hoping it would show mercy." Understanding the gravity, they lit the spectral flame. Instead of consuming wood, it cast a light that revealed the woodsman's true form, a guardian of the forest, a twisted wraith. As the flame grew, so did the wraith's form. It loomed over them, and in a final act of desperation, they offered themselves as peace to the entity. The wraith accepted their silence, their stillness. It enveloped them in a gentle, chilling embrace, and when the sun set, they were gone. leaving only the oak's cache to tell their tale. The sun dipped below the tree line as the friends arrived at the remote campsite in the Appalachian wilderness. Their laughter echoed, but the woods remained eerily quiet, as if life itself held its breath. Setting up camp, they joked about the usual camping fears, bears getting lost, but the jokes fell flat when a sudden chill descended, despite the evening fire they'd kindled. As night enveloped them, stories around the fire turned to local legends. There was talk of the Wendigo, a creature born from winter's hunger, and the Weeping Woman, whose cries echoed through the hills. Sarah, recalling a tale her grandmother told her, mentioned the Silent Watcher, a spirit that took offense to noise and disrespect in its domain. A twig snapped nearby, and all fell silent. The first oddity was a circle of stones not far from their tents, discovered by Emily during a midnight bathroom run. It looked untouched for years, yet it seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. The next morning, Lucas found their food supplies scattered, but nothing was eaten. It felt more like a warning than an attack. The group was unsettled, but decided to clean up and carry on. Mark noticed their maps were becoming increasingly unreliable, as if the forest was rearranging itself. The north arrow spun wildly, and eventually the maps were abandoned. They decided to hike to a nearby lake to regroup. Upon arrival, the water was still, reflecting the forest like a mirror. But no wildlife was visible. The lake was eerily devoid of life. Emily saw her reflection weep, but when she touched the water, it rippled with no wind. She didn't tell the others, fearing she'd sound delusional. As they settled by the lake, Tom found an old submerged canoe. He dragged it ashore, revealing a name carved into the wood: the Watcher's Whim. The canoe seemed to leak a black, oily substance. That night, a storm rolled in, and with it the sound of distant drums. The friends huddled in their tents, the rhythm of the rain mixed with the haunting beat of something ancient. The storm passed, but in its wake, an unearthly silence remained. They ventured out to find the campsite altered, the trees now forming a corridor that wasn't there before. The corridor led to an abandoned shack, its door ajar. Inside, a dusty mirror showed no reflections, only shadows where they stood. A single word was written in dust: remain. Lucas proposed they investigate the shack's origins, finding a hidden compartment with old letters. Each letter was addressed to a different camper, all from the group, yet they were dated from years ago. Reading the letters, they discovered personal details only they could know, penned by an unknown hand. The realization dawned that they were not the first to tread these grounds, nor would they likely be the last. A hidden trapdoor beneath the shack's floorboards revealed a dark cellar. With no other apparent exit, they descended, the air growing colder with each step. In the cellar, ancient artifacts adorned the walls: totems, masks, and a peculiar skin drum. The diary from the cabin was there, updated with entries about their own arrival. The latest entry warned them of the coming night, advising them to seek higher ground. Confused but not wanting to tempt fate, they hastily packed and sought a hill nearby. As they climbed, the ground seemed to resist their ascent, each step heavy with an unseen weight. They reached the hilltop as darkness fell, the valley below bathed in moonlight. From their elevated position, they witnessed the shack illuminate, its windows glowing with an otherworldly light. The forest echoed with the sound of chanting, the voices not their own. They decided to make a break for their car at dawn, but until then, they had to endure. Shadows danced around their campfire, just out of reach, whispering names and secrets. Emily's camera malfunctioned, and her last shot before it died was of the group. But the image was a blur, with dark figures looming in the background. The night dragged on, and one by one they fell into a fitful sleep. Sarah awoke to find the others murmuring in their sleep, uttering apologies to the Silent Watcher. Morning came, but the path to their car was obstructed by fallen trees. It was as if the forest had grown arms and barred their way. They retraced their steps to the shack, hoping for a clue or mercy. The diary had a new entry: offer your song, your silence, your sincerity. Reluctantly, they formed a circle and sang a song from their childhood, a melody pure and unthreatening. As they sang, the oppressive air lightened. The mirror in the shack began to show reflections again, but the images were of the friends, standing on the opposite side of the cellar, where a new door stood ajar. They ventured into this new chamber, finding a tableau of candles, each one with a label bearing a camper's name, including theirs, yet unlit. With shaky hands they lit their candles, and as each flame caught, the shadows receded. The diary's final entry: "Speak the truth of your hearts." They spoke words of friendship and regret for past follies. The cellar vibrated with their sincerity, and the door behind them creaked ominously. They emerged to find the path clear, the trees back to their original positions. The shack was now just ruins, the glow gone, the watcher seemingly appeased. As they drove away, they couldn't shake the feeling that the forest still watched. The true horror was the lingering doubt. Had they escaped, or were they just part of a longer, darker story? The return to civilization was met with disbelief from locals. The friends never mentioned the watcher again, but their camping gear remained untouched, a silent testament to their ordeal. Years later, they would avoid speaking of that night, but the memory of the silent watcher's domain stayed with them, a true disturbing tale of their own making. The trip to Shadowwood National Park was supposed to be a weekend filled with memories and laughter. The group of friends, seasoned campers, eagerly anticipated the escape into nature. However, an unsettling feeling lingered as they set out. Morning fog clung to the forest, and the animal sounds seemed twisted, as if nature itself whispered ominous warnings. Group leader Lucas tried to keep spirits high, regaling the others with tales of past camping triumphs. Yet Shadowwood's lore was darker. Decades ago, a campsite was found mysteriously abandoned, with belongings left behind as if the owners had vanished into thin air. This tale was the backdrop of their adventure, a chilling reminder of the park's unresolved history. As they pitched their tents in a secluded clearing, the sun began to dip below the horizon. The once vibrant forest now cast long, eerie shadows. Sarah, the most cautious of the group, couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Her unease was met with reassurances from her friends, but deep down she felt this trip might be different, more sinister. Night fell, and the campfire crackled, its light flickering against tense faces. Stories of urban legends gave way to local myths. Mark mentioned the Whispering Man, a specter said to haunt these woods, preying on those who didn't respect the wilderness. Laughter was forced, and eyes darted into the darkness more frequently. The first night passed with only minor frights, noises in the underbrush, a faint whisper on the wind. But the true horror was yet to unfold. Morning light revealed a new, unmarked path near their campsite. It seemed inviting, almost as if it had been waiting for them to discover it. Curiosity piqued, the group decided to follow the path. The forest grew denser and the air colder. Trees seemed to bend towards them, blocking sunlight. It felt as if they were walking through a forgotten, malevolent corridor. Lucas joked about needing a GPS, but no one laughed. Hours later, they stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. Its wooden structure was barely standing, and the windows were like empty eye sockets. A sense of dread enveloped them, but the allure of exploration was stronger. They crossed the threshold, and the door creaked ominously behind them. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly intact. Dusty shelves held old, unreadable books, and a rotting table was set as if for a meal long forgotten. In the corner, a rusted stove emitted a faint, otherworldly glow. The friends felt an invisible presence, their breaths catching in their throats. Suddenly, a loud crash from the next room sent everyone into a panic. Tom, the bravest of the group, volunteered to check it out. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but old furniture. Yet, the feeling of being watched intensified. The others called for him to return, their voices trembling. As they regrouped, Sarah found a diary on the table. Its pages were filled with the ramblings of someone isolated, desperate. The last entry spoke of a presence in the woods, a watcher that never sleeps. The group felt a chill run down their spines as the words seemed to echo the whispers from the night before. The diary's final entry mentioned a ritual to appease the watcher, involving items from their camp. Skeptical but desperate for answers, they decided to follow its instructions. The first item was a simple campfire trinket, but the second, The second required a lock of hair from someone who had already felt the watcher's gaze. None of them were willing to part with their hair, but as they argued, a sudden wind tore through the cabin, extinguishing their candles. In the pitch dark, a soft, cold hand seemed to brush against Emily's cheek, pulling a single strand of her hair. The group huddled together, fear palpable in the silence. After the candlelight was restored, Emily's hair was found on the table, next to the diary. The friends exchanged frightened glances, realizing the gravity of their situation. The diary hinted at consequences for those who ignored the rituals, consequences that manifested as whispers in the night and shadows that moved on their own. Deciding to abandon the cabin, they gathered their belongings, but the path they came from was nowhere to be found. Panic set in as they realized the forest had changed, trapping them in a maze of trees that seemed to whisper, "Stay, stay." As daylight waned, they stumbled upon a strange clearing. In the center stood a stone altar, covered in moss and ancient carvings. The diary's words echoed in their minds, suggesting this was the next part of the ritual. They were to leave an offering before nightfall, or risk becoming part of the forest's dark legacy. The group split up to gather materials for the offering, the atmosphere heavy with dread. Lucas found berries, Sarah some old photographs from her bag, and Mark offered his flashlight. Each step felt as though it was leading them further into a trap, but they had little choice. Tom discovered an old rusted knife in the underbrush, its handle intricately carved with what looked like the same patterns as the altar. He hid his concern, knowing that such an object could be both an offering and a weapon in these haunted woods. Night crept in, and with it, the return of the chilling whispers. They placed their offerings on the altar and stepped back. A sudden gust scattered the leaves they had disturbed, revealing a faint glowing symbol that matched one on the diary's last page. A sense of being observed heightened as the symbol pulsed with an eerie light. Suddenly the forest went silent, too silent. The friends looked around, their breath visible in the cold air. They knew they weren't alone. Emily suggested they perform the ritual as the diary described, hoping to appease whatever haunted them. Reluctantly, they began to share their darkest secrets. With each confession, the figure seemed to grow less substantial, but the forest's oppressive atmosphere remained. The ritual demanded vulnerability, and with each whispered secret, they felt more exposed, more trapped. After the last secret was spoken, the figure dissipated into mist. The symbol on the altar dimmed, and the forest sounds slowly returned. They didn't know if they were safe, but the immediate threat seemed gone. Exhausted, they decided to spend one more night, hoping to find the path come dawn. That night, dreams were invaded by the Watcher. Each friend experienced a personal nightmare, reflecting their confessed secrets. The dreams were vivid, terrifying, and felt real. They awoke to each other's screams, realizing they were not alone in their terror. Morning brought a strange calm. The path was still missing, but a new set of instructions appeared in the diary. It guided them to build a signal fire, using the altar as a base. As they worked, an unspoken tension grew. What if the Watcher returned, and what if it wasn't alone? The signal fire burned high, its smoke curling into the sky. Hours passed, and no rescue came. Instead, they heard a rhythmic thumping, growing louder. It was the sound of footsteps, deliberate and approaching. They armed themselves with what they could find, fear etched into every face. From the tree line, a rescue team emerged, looking as startled as the campers. The team leader asked about the fire and the strange cabin. The friends, relieved yet wary, shared their tale. The rescuers exchanged uneasy glances, one revealing he too had seen the Watcher in his youth. They were safe, but the true horror lingered in the unanswered questions and the shadows of their memories. The Whispering Pines of Whispering Bluff State Park were known for their beauty and tranquility, but not all stories from this wilderness ended in serenity. The park had a dark reputation among locals, tales of disappearances and eerie lights that danced between the trees. It was the summer of 1995 when 4 friends, Mark, Sarah, Lisa, and John, decided to ignore the warnings and embark on a camping trip. They sought adventure, but the park had other plans for those who dared to enter its shadows. As they set up their tents near the babbling brook, the sun was a fiery orb sinking beneath the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple. The campfire crackled to life, its flames casting long, flickering shadows that danced macabrely around them. The group laughed off their nerves, exchanging playful banter to fill the encroaching silence. Yet, as night fell, the atmosphere changed. The usual forest sounds gave way to an unsettling quiet, punctuated only by the distant hoot of a lone owl. The first strange occurrence was the disappearance of their food supplies. A raccoon or bear was the immediate assumption, but the camp was free of any wildlife tracks. That night, Sarah awoke to the sound of whispering. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, like the rustling of leaves, yet more sinister. She nudged Mark, who shared the tent, but he was asleep, his breathing steady. When she looked outside, she saw fleeting shadows that seemed to mock the light of their dying fire. Morning brought little relief. John discovered that their map had been altered, with a crude drawing of a figure with outstretched arms pointing towards the dense thicket. The group's unease grew, but their thirst for unraveling the mystery pushed them to venture deeper into the woods. Lisa, usually the most cautious, was the first to suggest that they might not be alone. Her words hung heavy in the humid air, a premonition that none of them took lightly. They decided to follow the strange markings on the map, hoping it was just a prank by some earlier campers. As they trudged through the underbrush, the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees, tall and ancient, blocked out the sun, leaving them in a perpetual twilight. The air grew colder, and their breaths visible, as if the very forest was exhaling a chilling mist upon them. Sarah's camera, which had captured countless memories, started to malfunction, the film burning with each attempted shot. The path led them to an abandoned clearing, where remnants of old campfires hinted at past gatherings. In the center, a large stone was engraved with more unsettling glyphs. The friends felt an inexplicable urge to touch the stone. As they did, a shiver ran through each of them, and the sensation of being watched intensified. They quickly retreated, but the sense of foreboding lingered, a weight on their shoulders as heavy as the dense canopy above. Back at their campsite, tensions were high. The whispers had ceased, but the feeling of isolation was palpable. Mark suggested they should pack up and leave, but the allure of solving the mystery kept them rooted. As dusk settled, they decided to spend one more night, armed with flashlights and a sense of resolve. John took the first watch, but his vigil was short-lived. He was soon found slumped against a tree, his eyes wide, claiming to have seen a figure that vanished into the night. The friends gathered around John, trying to piece together his fragmented story. He spoke of a tall figure, cloaked in darkness, that seemed to float rather than walk. Its presence was suffocating, and its eyes, though unseen, felt like they pierced through him. The group decided to stay up, keeping the fire stoked. Lisa began to share local legends of a vengeful spirit that haunted the woods, seeking company for its eternal solitude. As the night deepened, the forest's sounds returned, but with a twist. The calls of animals seemed to mimic human voices, crying out in distress. The friends clung to their story, trying to rationalize the sounds as mere tricks of the mind. Yet the moonlight revealed shapes in the mist, and the trees whispered with a voice that sounded like their own names, calling them into the dark embrace of the woods. Sarah, determined to capture proof of the strange occurrences, managed to fix her camera. She took a picture of the misty figures, but when she checked the photo, all she saw were distorted faces pressed against the tent walls. Panic set in, but they reinforced their perimeter with tripwires and took turns watching and resting. Each time someone closed their eyes, nightmares of the cloaked figure haunted them, its intentions unclear yet terrifying. The tripwires did little to comfort them as the night wore on. Every snap echoed through the camp, sending them into frenzies of flashlight beams scanning the darkness. By 3 a.m., exhaustion began to overwhelm them. Mark suggested a schedule, but no one volunteered for the next watch. In a silent agreement, they all succumbed to fatigue, the fire reduced to a few stubborn embers. Lisa was the first to wake, her scream slicing through the morning calm. The tent was found slashed open and John was missing. The only clue was a trail of disturbed leaves leading back into the forest. The friends gathered their courage and followed, the trail eventually vanishing near the ominous stone. They felt an unspoken pact with the unknown, a chilling certainty that their friend was no longer just lost, but taken. They found John's hat caught on a thorny bush, stained with what looked like fresh blood. Mark's hands trembled as he held it, the reality of the situation dawning on them. Sarah suggested they should call for help, but their phones had no signal. The isolation deepened their fear, and the forest seemed to pulse with a malevolent life, each tree a silent witness to John's fate. Deciding to press on, they came across an old, dilapidated cabin hidden in the undergrowth. Its wooden walls were weathered, and the door hung ajar, creaking in the wind. Inside, the musty air was thick with dust, and a rotting floorboard groaned under their weight. An ancient fireplace dominated one wall, and above it, a portrait of a stern-faced man whose eyes seemed to follow them. In a corner, they found a rusted metal box. Lisa pried it open to reveal a collection of weathered photographs. The images depicted campers from decades ago, all smiling in front of the same landmarks they had visited. The last photo was a close-up of the cloaked figure, its form more solid than spectral, with a caption reading, "He watches." A sudden clap of thunder startled them, and rain began to pour, soaking through the cabin's porous roof. They scrambled to find shelter in the decrepit structure. As they huddled together, the sound of footsteps echoed from the empty rooms, growing louder and closer. The door shut with a bang, though they were alone, and the fireplace flickered to life, casting a ghostly glow. The friends decided to use the storm as an opportunity to stay put and investigate the cabin further. In a dusty mirror, Sarah noticed her reflection seemed to lag behind her movements, and she swore she saw the reflection of the cloaked figure standing behind her. When she turned, there was nothing but the empty room and the rain pelting the fragile windows. Mark found a journal among the debris, its pages filled with the ravings of someone who had been isolated in the woods for too long. It spoke of the guardian of the grove, a being that demanded sacrifices to keep the forest alive. As he read aloud, the room seemed to grow colder, and the whispers from outside the cabin grew more coherent, as if responding to the words. The whispers turned into a chorus of voices, recounting stories of the lost and the damned. The friends covered their ears, but the voices seemed to echo inside their skulls. They spoke of past campers who had met grim fates, their spirits trapped within the grove. Lisa suggested the voices were trying to communicate, to warn them of something worse yet to come. When the rain abated, they ventured outside to find the clearing around the cabin had expanded, the trees having seemingly moved away from the structure during the storm. A new path had been revealed, leading to a part of the forest none of them remembered seeing before. The decision to follow it was unspoken, driven by a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. The path led them to a stagnant pond, its waters dark and impenetrable. Reflections in the water showed not their own faces but those of others, people they recognized from the photographs in the cabin. Panic-stricken, they stepped back, but the water's edge seemed to call them closer, promising answers in its murky depths. As they stared into the pond, a hand emerged from the water, grasping at Sarah's ankle. She was pulled in, her screams cut short by the cold embrace of the water. Mark and Lisa rushed to the edge, only to see Sarah's reflection smiling back at them, as if she was now part of the haunted lore. They retreated, hearts pounding, knowing they had to act before they, too, became part of the story. They returned to the cabin, desperate for a plan. The journal hinted at a ritual that could appease the guardian, a circle of stones where offerings were left. They theorized that if they could find this grove and leave something of value, they might save themselves and possibly rescue Sarah and John. Their hope was fragile, but it was all they had. The grove was hidden deep within the forest, but the whispers now guided them, leading them to a circle of stones overgrown with ivy. In the center lay an altar, upon which rested a tattered cloth. They placed John's hat and a pendant Lisa wore, a gift from her grandmother, as their offering. Silence fell as they stepped back, the forest holding its breath. Their offering was accepted, as evidenced by the sudden stillness of the air and the cessation of the whispers. However, a new sound began to permeate the clearing, the soft, sorrowful melody of a wooden flute. The music seemed to guide them, urging them deeper into the woods where the trees were adorned with tattered remains of campers' belongings. Following the music, they stumbled upon a hidden cave. The entrance was adorned with more of the cryptic glyphs they had seen before. Mark lit a torch, and they ventured inside, the eerie melody echoing off the walls. The cave was filled with stalactites that dripped steadily, each drop like a tick on a countdown to an inevitable doom. Deep within the cave, they found a chamber where the cloaked figure sat, motionless. Before it lay an ancient-looking book, open and illuminated by an otherworldly light. The figure didn't move as they approached, and they could see now it was more skeleton than flesh. The book contained the names of those who had vanished, including John's and Sarah's, written in a script that seemed to twist and change before their eyes. Lisa's voice barely above a whisper. She read a passage that spoke of a curse bound to the land, invoked by those who did not respect the old ways. The Guardian was a keeper of this curse, and the only way to break it was to recite the incantation found at the end of the book, a risky endeavor that could either free them or bind them to the forest forever. With trembling lips, Mark began to recite the incantation. The air vibrated with each word, and the cave seemed to come alive. Shadows writhed on the walls, and the skeleton crumbled to dust. The book's pages turned to ash, and the music stopped abruptly. Outside, the forest began to groan and shift, as if the land itself was in pain. As the last word was spoken, a blinding light filled the cave, forcing them to shield their eyes. When the light faded, they found themselves back at their original campsite, the forest quiet and serene, as if the past horrors had been a nightmare. Their gear was there, untouched. Sarah and John were nowhere to be seen. The experience left them with a haunting certainty. The forest had let them go. But at what cost? They packed quickly, leaving the park without a glance back, the whispers now a chilling echo in their minds. That night, the campfire refused to light. Instead, a spectral flame appeared in the distance, drawing them towards a clearing where they found an ethereal figure. The figure, a spectral woodsman, beckoned them. He spoke of a harvest needing completion, his voice a haunting whisper that chilled their bones. They fled in terror, but the forest seemed to echo the woodsman's whispers. Branches clawed at their skin, and roots tripped them, as if the forest itself was preventing their escape. By dawn, they stumbled upon an ancient oak, its hollow trunk revealing a hidden cache of items. Journals, clothing, and trinkets, all belonging to previous campers. A journal inside recounted a similar tale, ending with the writer's plea, "We lit the spectral flame, hoping it would show mercy." Understanding the gravity, they lit the spectral flame. Instead of consuming wood, it cast a light that revealed the woodsman's true form, a guardian of the forest, a twisted wraith. As the flame grew, so did the wraith's form. It loomed over them, and in a final act of desperation, they offered themselves as peace to the entity. The wraith accepted their silence, their stillness. It enveloped them in a gentle, chilling embrace, and when the sun set, they were gone, leaving only the oak's cache to tell their tale. Second story, The Echoes of Blackwood. In the remote reaches of Blackwood Forest, 5 friends sought a weekend of tranquility. But from the start, the forest seemed alive, their every step mirrored by faint, echoing footfalls. They set up camp near a strange rock formation that hummed with an inexplicable energy. The area was beautiful, yet something felt amiss, as if they were intruders in a sacred space. As night fell, the echoes grew louder, more distinct. They heard laughter and murmurs, as though other campers were nearby, yet the forest was empty save for them. The group gathered around a campfire, but the flames flickered oddly, casting shadows that mimicked the movements of unseen guests. Sarah noticed shapes in the smoke, faces contorting in silent screams. She kept it to herself, not wanting to alarm her friends, but her heart pounded with dread. The next day, they found a decrepit cabin. Inside, the furniture was arranged as if for a dinner long forgotten, dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight as if disturbed by invisible hands. In the cabin's hearth, a piece of paper bore the words, "Listen to the echoes, and they will guide you." The friends exchanged worried glances, unsure whether to heed or ignore the message. Lucas ventured to the rocks to investigate. He found carvings that seemed to tell a story, a warning about voices that lead unwary campers astray. As they debated, the echoes became voices, clear and distinct, urging them to follow. Reluctantly, they packed and traced the sound, which led them to an ancient burial mound. The mound's entrance gaped open, inviting yet menacing. Driven by an inexplicable force they entered, the air inside cold and damp, carrying the weight of centuries. Deep within the mound, they discovered a chamber with walls that resonated with the forest's echoes. In the center, a stone slab with an inscription, "Speak the truth to break the chains." One by one, they confessed their deepest fears and regrets, the chamber amplifying their voices into the darkness. The echoes seemed to feed on their honesty, growing louder with each revelation. After their confessions, the echoes subsided, and a gentle hum filled the chamber. The stone slab lifted slightly, revealing a narrow passage bathed in moonlight. They crawled through the passage, emerging at the forest's edge. The burial mound was no longer visible, as if it had dissolved into the night. Relief was short-lived. The friends realized they could still hear the echoes in their minds, haunting whispers that followed them back to civilization. Back home, they found it hard to adjust. The echoes persisted, echoing in their heads at night, driving them to the brink of madness. They met to discuss their ordeal, agreeing to return to Blackwood to confront the echoes. This time, the forest was silent, as if waiting for their return. At the sight of the mound, which reappeared as if summoned, they found a new inscription. "The forest remembers. You are now its voice." As they stood there, the echoes ceased within their minds, replaced by a deafening silence. They were free, but the experience left them changed, forever aware of the hidden voices of Blackwood.